have plenty to be thankful for, Craig, to be sure. But, you know, as the country slides into it's hard to describe what it's sliding into. It's sliding into an oblivion. It's sliding into an abyss. It's getting deeper into a fascist state. What I find remarkable, and just as a quick preface, I find that almost nobody that I talk to of American citizenship has any idea what fascism is.
Yeah,
None.
not anymore.
None. There's kind of a definition of fascism. Well, you know, that's what Nazi Germany was, but it's not possible for the United States to have that. Well, yeah, it is. We got it right now.
Depends on, I guess, everybody has, it's hard for people get to agree on what the term actually means. You know, a lot of people scream up and go, "You're a fascist," and they have no idea what the term even means. It just sounds good. It makes you sound smart to say somebody's a fascist, or at least you think you're smart if you call somebody that.
Oh, I try to get smart and tell them that I think they're a nihilist.
That's good. That'll send them to scramble into the dictionary.
Well, it usually shuts them up and they walk away. All right, let's move on.
All right, well, let's just dive right in. Again, it's always fun to get caught up. It's now been several months since we've spoken. And I thought, Jim, you know, what I usually do on these formats is I get to ask the questions first, but there are going to be so many questions for you that I don't want to take too much time doing that. And so I do think, though, I have one topic I'd like you to address, and it seems to be really the most important topic at present. Events in the Middle East are moving very quickly, whether they're politically, geopolitically, in terms of possible war between maybe Lebanon, Hezbollah, Israel, Syria. All that stuff is moving that direction. We got the events of Saudi Arabia and Yemen, and I mean, I could just go on and on describing how effed up that whole situation is. But I know you're all over this. You've got great contacts throughout the world. I keep you up to speed on not only what's happening there, but it can see, but what's going on below the surface. And so between what's happening in Saudi Arabia, the purge and the arrests, what's going on with the Saudi Aramco IPO and who might be buying that, and how badly do the Saudis need the cash, and the U.S. supporting them and defending them for the petrodollar. And I mean, obviously, I could probably let you start talking. You could talk for a whole hour just on this, but I think we'll start there. Give us your current thoughts on that whole situation, then we'll start getting into the listener questions.
It's such an enormous topic. You're right. An hour would not be enough. But let me just hit on some main high-level points. And I'm not operating on notes here. I just finished the Money War report for November. It's being posted this morning before noon. There's an entire chapter. It was 10 pages on Saudi Arabia. 10! I mean, it's crazy what's going on right now. I titled the chapter Saudi Purge and Instability. I want to start off by saying that there's not a firm consensus about what's happening with the Saudis. And I'm going to call Saudi the country, because it's Saudi Arabia. I get tired of saying Saudi Arabia. Some call it KSA, the Kingdom of Saudi. For me, it's just Saudi. Okay, Saudi land. To begin with, this prince, the crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, he was not directly in line, and it got confusing who's directly in line for the king position, the throne. It got confusing when they ran out of strong brothers. There was Fahd, there was Abdullah, and after that, it's really a bunch of runt brothers. So the runt brothers are fighting with some of the relatives of the stronger brothers who have the dead King Fahd and the dead King Abdullah. Oh my gosh, it gets extremely complicated. There was another fellow, his name was also Muhammad. I'm coming to learn that the firstborn is called Muhammad in the family. All right, a different Muhammad bin Nayef was the favorite of Langley. But King Salman decided, I don't want that nephew of mine to be the crown prince. I'm the king. I'm going to make it my son, Mohammed bin Salman. He's called MBS. And here's some irony. 10 years ago, we had the explosion of mortgage-backed securities. So we had an MBS crisis. You can see where I'm going with this. Right now we have a passage of power and the throne in Saudi. It's MBS again. Oh my gosh. MBS pushed aside the Langley favorite, the CIA favorite for the Crown Prince post. It was Mohammed bin Nayef, MBN. Okay, Langley's upset. Now, part of these purges, oh gosh, I like the word purge much better than I like arrest for corruption, because how do you define corruption? Is it corrupt for a royal family to do nothing all their lives and to siphon off a few billion a year? I think it is. I mean, what's the crime? It's not corruption. I think the crime is laziness and sloth. Parasite. Okay. Some of the arrested, there were many arrested. They're not just princes, they're Saudi officials in the government, they're business leaders who are, doing questionable deeds. It's very pervasive what the arrests included. And my take on it is that those arrested and detained come from a few categories. Rival family, owner of broadcast media, owner of other critical companies involved with trade and investment, opponents to his foreign policy, military leaders who object to the war in Yemen, and here's the zinger, some narcotics connections like Prince Bandar with Langley and the Bush family. Okay, here's the best possible interpretation. I got this from The Voice, and The Voice is a man with many opinions, but he also has this opinion. He said, Jim, it is possible that MBS, the Crown Prince, is not just cleaning house, not just, stopping corruption, but he's trying to end the lazy connections to the royal family from, say, the sixth brother, and a family that really doesn't amount to much, doesn't have a whole lot of connections or influence or intellectual horsepower or whatever. But he's also cutting perhaps the narco connections to Saudi Arabia that he does not like. And The Voice said, Jim, you may not be aware, but 15, 20 years ago, Prince Salman, who's now King Salman, in his previous position, was governor of Jeddah. And he was known as being a very thorough policeman, if you will. What he did was he cleaned things up. He got rid of corruption. He didn't really care if somebody was a distant royal or whatever. He arrested them. He confiscated property. He confiscated wealth if they were guilty of crime. Okay, so he has a history of being tough, like a tough district attorney, if you will, in the city of Jeddah. Okay, well now his son has a vision. His son does not like the Wahhabi Islam element in the upper levels of the Saudi royal family. So he's trying to bring about a more secular combination, alliance with the Sunni moderate Islam. And I think it's going to be tough. Now let's try to get the connection with Prince Al-Walid. I'm a very irreverent guy. For the longest time, I call him Prince Dickweed. Sorry about that.
Yeah, me too. I didn't even realize. I was calling him Prince Ala Dickweed, too.
Okay, well, he is a Wahhabi. He's a fundamentalist. I think they're crazy. I think they're just wild crazy in their interpretations of the Quran, and I don't even want to get into it. But
right.
He's an opponent of Prince Salman. And they don't get along. And the whole Vegas incident might have been an attempt to kill the prince, Prince Salman. He was at the Four Seasons Hotel, which is at the top of the Mandalay. And this gets very, very ugly.
I didn't really, at the same time, Prince Salman was at the Four Seasons?
Yes.
I had no idea. That's crazy.
There was a lot of shooting, and the reports, at least from the U.S. Army surgeon from Walter Reed Hospital, who went to the hospitals, he reported there was a lot of fake blood, but he was silenced, not killed. He was just told, shut up. There were not very many broken windows because there were blank bullets fired. There may have been some deaths. To be sure, there were some deaths, and it's all pretty horrible. And it gets very complicated. There was a helicopter spotted on the roof, and it was not the police. It was not the press. It was the getaway. And I don't want to get into a lot of the more ugly details because it's not certain about what exactly is going on.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But it looks like Prince Al-Walid was trying to do an assassination and a palace coup of Prince Salman.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a new one. I haven't heard that one. I have no idea. That's wild to think that. Huh. All right, anyway, continue.
Okay, so some of the arrested
in Saudi Arabia.
They include Prince Al-Walid.
Right. Dickweed.
Yeah. And the offer that is in the press, it's widely now reported, is that the arrested, which include well over 100 royals, is forfeit, I think it's 60% of your wealth, or else you're going to jail. So the purge and the arrests are also a financing campaign. This is pretty weird. I've never heard of anything like this in my entire life. You have some businessmen who are also arrested. You have some military generals who are arrested. You have a broadcast center head, and he was arrested. Apparently, Prince Mansour Mukrin is the highest ranking in a group of 11 deaths in a helicopter crash.
Yeah, right.
Okay, now this includes bin Laden. It includes the potential heir to the throne, Mansour Mukrin. It includes a satellite broadcast executive named, Aldal Ibrahim, a former Minister of Economy and Planning, Abdel Fattah. Now, I ask a question. How did the helicopter get downed? Was that from Yemeni rebels, or was that from a loyal element of the Saudi military to the Crown Prince to protect from a palace coup?
Mechanical failure.
This is very complicated. Now, okay, apart from the coup, apart from the arrests, there is going to be some new funding to the Saudi treasury. And I asked the question, is that to pay for the bills, or is it to continue the war in Yemen?
You talking about the Saudi Aramco?
No. There's money coming in from the arrests and the purges, what I just talked about.
I got you.
I haven't even gotten to Aramco.
Right.
Okay, so money's going to be coming in from the arrests of 100 royals who are all multi-billionaires who are told to forfeit 60% or stay in jail or stay in the hotel. I mean, it's like house arrest in a giant luxurious hotel. I doubt they're enjoying themselves. And now there are reports that some of them have been beaten up and are going to the hospital for wounds while under interrogation. So there's a lot of rivalry. There's a lot of bad blood. There's a lot of half-brothers. This is very ugly. This is very complicated. Yeah. There's going to be money coming into the Saudi treasury from the confiscations. There's 1,700 bank accounts that are confiscated or frozen. They've asked for help with United Arab Emirates and Kuwait to lock down those bank accounts also. They're like holding companies. I mean, let's put a few spare billion in Kuwait in case we need to get away. That's the thinking of the royals. These are people who, many of whom never work, but lay claim to billions. So I think Prince MBS is removing the connections from parasites and opponents. And it looks like Prince Al-Walid, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if Al-Walid was in charge of downing the helicopter, because Prince Mukreen was perhaps a rival to the throne. Oh my goodness.
Right. So Jim, what is this, if MBS is going to be the guy going forward and he's purging all these people, and I'm obviously taking their cash, helps them with their little cash problem they're having, what does this mean for, I mean, can you decipher, read the tea leaves about what this means for the short-term future of the whole petrodollar and ultimately the Saudis moving in the direction of the Chinese, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's where I was going to go. Here's how the confiscation, I say money coming in. Let me just talk about, let me refer to that as the confiscations and that resulting flow of funds. It's a big flow of funds. It's super big. It could be a couple $100 billion. Okay. It means the Crown Prince Salman might not need to do many concessions with China. It means that he might not require a good gob of funding for Saudi investments. Mm-hmm. They're probably going to do some upgrades with Aramco. Okay, I haven't touched on Aramco yet. That's intentional, because this is all very big apart from Aramco. Okay, there's pressure by the Chinese to permit not just Saudi, but Arab oil sales. They buy oil from Qatar and pay in RMB. They want to buy Saudi oil and pay for it RMB. The Saudis have been resisting that, and the result has been that China has been expanding in a very large scale their purchases of Russian oil. It looks like the Saudis might do something dumb right now, and that's not give the Saudis, not give the Chinese the right to buy Saudi oil in RMB. The Saudis might close the door on China, and if they do, the Saudis are going to be stuck with both the good and the bad elements from the United States. And that's how I see it. Well, by that I mean, go ahead.
Don't you think, and wouldn't the Chinese probably retaliate and use maybe Iran as a proxy against the Saudis as well? I mean, wouldn't they run that risk?
Yeah, that's a risk for the Saudis right now. The Chinese and the Iranians are very close in terms of trade and energy purchase. And Iran is increasingly close with the Russians for a number of things that include military activity and military. By that I mean purchases of weapons, but also joint drills and cooperation. With China, it's more trade and managing the barter and the big account. With Russia, it's all the above. Russians don't buy Iranian oil. Right. Russians have their own oil and gas. But Russians engage in trade, construction projects, but not too many, missile sales and other, uranium refinement equipment, stuff like that for the Iranians. All right, let's get back to the Saudis. If they shut the door on China and piss them off, Saudi's going to be stuck dealing with the both good and bad elements of the United States. That means the white hat military, Pentagon, but it also means dealing with the angry Langley group, because Prince Bandar is their guy, and he was arrested. Mm-hmm. And they're going to probably try to confiscate a lot of his wealth. They're probably going to try to confiscate and arrest a couple of other key figures. It's not just Bandar Bush, that's his nickname, Bandar Bush. Prince Bandar. What was his role in the past years? Well, I'll tell you. He was paid to come up with a list of patsies. It was his list of the 10 or 11 young Cessna pilots who were blamed for 9/11. It was from Bandar Bush on a contract, a sweet multi-billion-dollar contract, to get that all prepared to set up the patsies. Okay, that's something that, for instance, Max Keiser is not very aware of, and he needs to be more aware of, the patsies. Bandar Bush, Prince Bandar, was charged with that, was, given that commission. He survived 3 years ago some attacks. I think they were not in Saudi Arabia, but he was hospitalized in Saudi Arabia. And amazingly, Craig, I had a client who was not living in Saudi at the time. He was living in the American hemisphere, let's leave it at that. And he was the IT head for the hospital in Jeddah, where they were hiding Prince Bandar, who was almost killed by some bombs. And he talked to some nurses and found out, yeah, that's Prince Bandar. And he tried to get as much information as he could, and he was amazed how little he could get except just to see the steady flow of helicopters coming in to visit Prince Bandar. And I'm sure some of them were the narco managers. So I think Bandar Bush has a group of 6, 7, 8, 10 narco managers. I'm really curious to know, were they arrested too? Because if Prince Salman makes an enemy a second time with Langley by confiscating and really running through the mill the entire narco connection in Saudi Arabia, which is significant in connection to the Bushes, he's gonna earn Langley vengeance, and that usually means a funeral. This is getting very, very ugly. Prince Salman needs to be careful. He pushed aside the Langley favorite as crown prince from another half-brother family. It gets messy because when they're kings, they like to have women, and they don't, how should I say, use protection. So they end up having lots of kids with lots of women. And the men are all half-brothers, and then they lay claim to the throne. It's a battle of 60 to 70 half-brothers. It gets incredibly complicated. Like it then becomes primogeniture. Who's the oldest brother? Yeah. Okay, the oldest son. Fine, we take him. All right, now when he's dead, we take the next oldest brother. And when he's dead, we'll take the next older brother. And when we run out of significant brothers, we're going to have a battle. I call them the runts. There might be two, and you know what I mean. There's a brother who's just a ne'er-do-well. A brother who just has no idea what's going on, who's maybe out in the desert at the strip clubs or on his yacht all the time getting drunk. He's not fit to be king. That's what I call a runt brother. So he's ruled out. And when he's ruled out, you start talking about the sons of the powerful ex-kings. That's what's going on right now. Now, Prince Salman has some visions for recreating and reconstructing Saudi Arabia to get away from its dependence on oil. And a lot of analysts in the West are thinking he might be using code to proclaim that he wants to get away from the dollar. Mm-hmm. And if he does that, he's going to earn the same kind of anger that was heaped upon Saddam Hussein.
And Gaddafi.
Yeah, and Gaddafi. Gaddafi, he not only wanted to sell oil outside the dollar, he wanted to create a gold dinar for North Africa and all their production of oil. And he didn't get very far. I still wonder if Gaddafi is alive, escaped all that, and allowed the stories of his double being killed and disemboweled. I don't know. It's hard to know. There were reports of Gaddafi running around in Zimbabwe 2 years ago. But who knows? Maybe it was somebody just pretending to be Gaddafi. I don't know. The point is, Prince Salman has a vision, They call it Vision 2030. He wants to expand and create a city, a new city in Saudi Arabia. This is some of his, I think this is a little bit of a break from reality for the prince. I mean, the crown prince, so on. He wants the new city to be 15 times larger or greater than New York City. Okay, well, my calculus says that's 150 to 200 million people. Really, Prince? Where are you going to get the money? From confiscated royal accounts, confiscated narco accounts, confiscated business executive accounts? Because it ain't going to come from crude oil income. Oh, I don't know how he's going to do this. Yeah. And furthermore, if you're a European or a North American businessman and you're watching the confiscations and arrests, are you going to want to invest a few billion in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move on to Aramco, shall we?
Yes. And Jim, we've probably got about 5 more minutes before got to start getting into the questions if we're going to keep on our timeline.
Okay.
So, Aramco.
Let me be brief. Aramco is a fraud. Saudi Arabia is engaged in the Yemen war because they're depleting their oil reserves. Yemen is on the same Arabian Peninsula to their south. It's loaded with oil and gas. A few stories accidentally find their way into the Western press about the ample oil and gas deposits in Yemen. The truth of the matter regarding Saudi is that they have depleted their oil reserves to a great extent, and they lie about. They actually say they have 260 billion barrels of oil left. If they have 20% of that, I would be amazed. So they've been pumping oil for 50 years, world leader for 40 years or more, and they've got no depletion. Oh yeah, I can understand that math. That's called stupid math. It doesn't add up at all. Okay, so there are Western analysts out there who use Royal Dutch, Exxon, Rosneft, and other very large oil companies, and they do a comparative analysis, and they come up with a figure of $300 to $400 billion for the value of Aramco, not 2,000 billion. I think it's 4 to 5 times. So 400 to 500 billion is the value of Aramco. And my joke is, what percentage of that is for their equipment? Because their oil deposits are largely gone.
Yeah, blue sky.
They have, the blue sky. I think 80% of the Aramco valuation comes from their petrochemical machinery, equipment, plants. That's my opinion. We have some complications. The Western analysts have been tarnishing this IPO by saying it's worth 4 to 5 times less, so they can't get an underwriter. Because if an underwriter like let's just say Barclays of London, Barclays comes forth and has a big stock deal, and they usher in their nice, rosy clients, their well-heeled clients. They get lawsuits in the next year when the discovery takes place, and they determine that the oil reserves are not present. I think there is a problem right now, preliminary to the IPO, of actual discovery for potential clients and their brokerage houses. So London and New York have been ruled out. Hong Kong is in. I think we're likely to see the Chinese buy a stake, and they claim it's 5% stake of Aramco when it's really going to be 25, because they're going to lie to the public and admit to China that their entire valuation is 5 times less. So 5% becomes 25%. Trump is doing something, trying to kiss the prince's hind parts and hope for a New York City listing of the Aramco stock. But he seems to forget that he is so happy about the Saudi lawsuit law in the Congress that blames Saudi Arabia for 9/11, which is absolutely cockeyed nonsense propaganda, and allows for lawsuits by surviving families against the U.S.-held Saudi assets. So Saudi doesn't want New York as a listing because they're out looking to borrow money like from Russia and raise money with Aramco because their assets are frozen. This happened 3 years after the Swiss banks have their charade with UBS and Credit Suisse. Announced criminality, the U.S. comes in. What jurisdiction does the U.S. have in the Swiss banks? None. So why did they come in and take control of the two companies? I'll tell you why. They stole the Arab gold, which was largely Saudi, in the Swiss bullion banks. This is another side of ugly complicated. Everything about Saudi is ugly complicated.
It's just like one thing leads to the next.
Right, and I didn't really get into a lot of details of narcotics because they're funneling narcotics funds to ISIS.
You know, and actually, that's the first question I have of the emails. And so maybe I'll just go there at this point. But it's like Saudi is like that Russian little, puzzle, with the babushka dolls, where there's a big one, you open it up, and then there's another one, and then you open that, and there's a smaller one inside that, and a smaller one inside that. It's just one after the other, isn't it?
Well, yeah, Saudi's a complicated country. It's a kingdom.
Yeah.
I didn't even get into the resentment for internal problems from a growing young population.
Yeah.
A population that is not as fervent with Islam as 20 years ago.
Right.
That resents the royal families living lives of billionaires and never working. The national wealth has been plundered. The people are angry. And now their gasoline price just went up 40% to $1 a gallon.
Well, to that end, Jim, look at they finally had to yield on letting women drive.
Oh, yeah, I'd like to see some women in bikinis on their beach.
There you go.
Yeah, right, there you go.
Here, let me, at this point, because you mentioned ISIS. And this is another multifaceted, deep question, but I've got 4 questions emailed to me. I got 6 or 7 in queue, and we've got, what, a half hour, 40 minutes tops? So let me go into this, Jim, and we'll just see where all this takes us again, because I don't know. All I can do is relay to you these questions, and I'll let you just run with it.
I'll try to make them brief, because we covered a lot of good stuff with some depth.
All right, this first one comes from a Canadian TFMR subscriber named Chuck. He's got a 2-part question, but I'll hit you with the first one, and then maybe we'll double back to the second part. He says, there's been a lot of this news lately. I think, what was it, in the Financial Times, about the U.S. providing cover to those ISIS guys getting out of Raqqa. Remember that? It was maybe a week ago that all that broke. Getting them all out of there before the Syrian army could wipe them out. Where the hell those guys go, do you think? Where did they get redeployed to? So that there could be another, U.S. intervention or whatever problem. Where'd those guys go, Jim?
They went to Iraq. Iraq has some significant, I must preface, I'm not an expert in ISIS movements and the battles going on with the many different sides in Syria and the boundary areas in Iraq. I'm not an expert, but a friend of mine is. He talked to me a week ago, and he said the ISIS troops have control of northern Iraq. And ISIS does not have control of much of anything in Syria. So if there's any escape by ISIS guerrillas, militias, it's to the strongholds in Iraq.
So that's well, anyway. All right, so what are they going to stage there? What happens next to those guys, regardless of their, let's call it their genealogy? How they, how ISIS came about and all that kind of stuff.
I think what's going to happen next is the United States gets out of Iraq so they don't have a second round to a war there.
Okay.
ISIS is very likely to team up with elements that are not friendly to the United States.
Right.
U.S. has very few friends in that region. There are about 3 or 4 different factions, and I'm not sure any of them are friendly with the United States except for some old loyals in Baghdad, Iraq, and the ISIS guerrillas. I think all the rest hate the United States and would kill them in a moment's notice.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Next. This is not an area of expertise for me.
No, that's fine. All right. How about this one? This comes from Australia. This comes from Ronnie. I'll just read this to you. It's a number of sentences. In my mind, the U.S. has already in reality declared war on China and Russia. We see the North Korea ramp up, the movement of U.S. troops into Somalia to neutralize the Chinese base in Djibouti, the continued assault on Russia directly with sanctions and indirectly. The question is, when do the East respond? We all understand that a financial assault will convert the U.S. fleet into a massive floating scrap metal. We saw that with the USSR. The East will have the financial means to retaliate. Jim, why are they not doing this, and when might that change?
Russia and China don't want World War III. Why should they retaliate on a military front?
Well, I think he's talking about retaliating financially.
They are. China's been dumping tremendous amounts of treasury bonds and doing more so from their sovereign wealth funds than from their official accounts. The war is the U.S. versus Russia. I call it the Rothschild War. I mean, as soon as the Rothschilds were kicked out of the banking system in Moscow, Ukraine happened. Yet the nitwits in the United States haven't figured that out yet. Okay, we're at war with Russia. We're moving missiles to the Russian border to prevent their expansion when the United States is the only one with any visible expansion. So we're blaming Russia for what we're doing. We're expanding NATO to include Eastern Europe, former Soviet bloc countries. That's the expansion, but we're blaming Russia for expansion. It's cockeyed. It's insane. It's lunatic.
Right.
Okay, we're not at war with China. I disagree with that questioner. We're provoking a troublesome trade partner in the China Sea and the Straits, and I didn't want to talk about North Korea. That's just crazy, and I got some opinions that are a little bit wild, and I don't want to talk about North Korea. North Korea is something that the United States uses to try to provoke China. It just doesn't work.
Right.
China will not allow itself to be provoked. Instead, it will respond by launching more vehicles of a non-dollar nature heading down the path toward the gold standard. That's the Chinese response. China is still an active trade partner with the United States, still doing $20 billion in trade surplus with the United States per month. So anyone who claims we're at war with China is just dead wrong. You don't have a big trade partner with China and be at war with them. We do block certain isolated products. For instance, right now, China is very content in buying more grains and say vegetables from Russia. One of the big secret stories out there right now is that Russia is a magnificent exporter of agricultural goods. They're turning lots of arable steppes land into farmland. I mean, it's entire communities with just agriculture that don't have cities too close nearby. Mm-hmm. Okay. We're not at war with China. We are at war with Russia. And Germany is coming into the picture as saying, we're sick of your whole conflict with Russia. We're going to expand trade again with Russia. Okay, that's the zinger in Europe.
Well, then let me use that as a segue to the first listener question that comes from Chris. Because you mentioned China ultimately in reinforcing some type of gold standard or some monetary standard, financial stability, whatever. Dr. Chris refers to that as the Great Reset. Seems like that's been around the corner for a couple of years now. How close do you think we are to that eventuality?
Okay, I think we're in the reset. So if you're waiting for the reset, you've missed elements of the early parts of the reset. The announcement of the cross-border interbank payment system, the CIPS, that's part of the reset. that competes with the SWIFT program and makes countries that join the Eurasian Trade Zone untouchable to SWIFT sanctions. That's a reset. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, that is a giant